Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for October the 20th. Today we are reading together a couple of chapters here in First Chronicles. We'll be looking at First Chronicles chapters 23 and 24, which is going to focus on the divisions of the Levites and then narrow down even further to the divisions of the priests. This follows on the heels of the chronicler telling us about David's plans for the temple, and we know that is a big focus of the chronicler, is telling not just history for historicity's sake, but to tell the history of Israel, to focus especially on spiritual matters, those most important things pertaining to the kingship, the coming Messiah, the temple, returning to proper temple worship, and then the priest are certainly necessary in order for that to take place. And if you want priests, you got Levites. So we're going to read about them a good deal today. So let me get the text of First Chronicles chapters 23 and 24 up on the screen, beginning at First Chronicles chapter 23 and verse number 1 today. First Chronicles 23, verse number 1. When David was old and full of days, he installed his son Solomon as king over Israel. Then he gathered all the leaders of Israel, the priests and Levites. The Levites 30 years old or more were counted. The total number of men was 38,000 by head counts. Of these, David said, 24,000 are to be in charge of the work of Yahweh's temple. 6,000 are to be officers and judges. 4,000 are to be gatekeepers, and 4,000 are to praise Yahweh with instruments that I have made for worship. Then David divided them into divisions according to Levi's sons, Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. The Gershonites, Ladan and Shimei. Ladan's sons, Jehiel was the first, then Zetham and Joel, 3. Shimei's sons, Shelomoth, Haziel, and Haran, 3. Those were the heads of the families of Ladan. Shimei's sons, Jahath, Ziza, Jeush, and Beriah. Those were Shimei's sons, 4. Jahath has the first, and Ziza was the second. Jahath was the first, and Ziza was the second. However, Jeush and Beriah did not have many sons, so they became one family and received a single assignment. Kohath's sons, Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uzziel, 4. Amram's sons, Aaron and Moses. Aaron, along with his descendants, was set apart forever to consecrate the most holy things, to burn incense in the presence of Yahweh, to minister to him, and to pronounce blessings in his name forever. All that basically means they were assigned the priesthood. Verse number 4, as for Moses, the man of God, his sons were named among the tribe of Levi. Moses' sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Gershom's sons, Shebuel, was first. Eleazar's sons were Rehabiah, first. Eleazar did not have any other sons, but Rehabiah's sons were very numerous. Ishar's sons, Shelomith was first. Hebron's sons, Jeriah was first. Amariah second. Jahaziel third, and Jechamiam fourth. Uzziel's sons, Micah was first, and Ishiah second. Merari's sons, Mali and Mushi. Mali's sons, Eleazar and Kish. Eleazar died having no sons, only daughters. Their cousins, the sons of Kish, married them. Mushi's sons, Mali, Ader, and Jeremoth, 3. These were the descendants of Levi by their ancestral families. The family heads, according to their registration by name in the head count, 20 years old or more, who worked in the service of Yahweh's temple. For David said, Yahweh God of Israel has given rest to his people, and he has come to stay in Jerusalem forever. Also, the Levites no longer need to carry the tabernacle or any of the equipment for its service. For according to the last words of David, the Levites 20 years old or more were to be counted. But their duty will be to assist the descendants of Aaron with the service of Yahweh's temple, being responsible for the courts and the chambers, the purification of all the holy things, and the work of the service of God's temple, as well as the rows of the bread of the presence, the fine flour for the grain offering, the wafers of unleavened bread, the baking, the mixing, and all measurements of volume and length. They are also to stand every morning to give thanks and praise to Yahweh, and likewise in the evening, whenever burnt offerings are made to Yahweh on the Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed festivals, they are to offer them regularly in Yahweh's presence according to the number prescribed for them. They are to carry out their responsibilities for the tent of meeting, for the holy place, and for their relatives, the descendants of Aaron, in the service of Yahweh's temple. Chapter 24 tells us that the divisions of the descendants of Aaron were as follows. Aaron's sons were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. But Nadab and Abihu died before their father. They had no sons, so Eleazar and Ithamar served as priests. Together with Zadok from the descendants of Eleazar and Ahimelech from the descendants of Ithamar, David divided them according to their assigned duties of their service. Since more leaders were found among Eleazar's descendants than Ithamar's, they were divided accordingly. 16 heads of the ancestral families were from Eleazar's descendants, and 8 heads of ancestral families were from Ithamar's. They were assigned by lots, for they were officers of the sanctuary and officers of God among both Eleazar's and Ithamar's descendants. The secretary Shemaiah, son of Nethanel, a Levite, recorded them in the presence of the king and the officers, the priest Zadok, Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, and the heads of the families of the priests of the Levites. One ancestral family was taken for Eleazar, and then one for Ithamar. The first lot fell to Jehorarib, the second to Jediah, the third to Harim, the fourth to Seorim, the fifth to Malchijah, the sixth to Mijamim, the seventh to Hakoz, the eighth to Abijah, the ninth to Jeshua, the 10th to Shechaniah, the 11th to Elashib, the 12th to Jakim, the 13th to Hupa, the 14th to Jeshaeb, the 15th to Bilgah, the 16th to Emer, the 17th to Hazir, the 18th to Habiziz, the 19th to Pethahiah, the 20th to Jehezkel, the 21st to Jakin, the 22nd to Jamul, the 23rd to Deliah, and the 24th to Maaziah. These had their assigned duties for service when they entered Yahweh's temple, according to the regulations which they received from their ancestor Aaron, as Yahweh God of Israel had commanded him. As for the rest of Levi's sons, from Amram's sons, Shubael, from Shubael's sons, Jehediah, from Rehabiah, from Rehabiah's sons, Ishiah was the first, from Isharites, from the Isharites, Shelomoth, from Shelomoth's sons, Jahath, from Hebron's sons, Jeriah the first, Amariah the second, Jahaziel the third, and Jekameam the fourth. From Uziel's sons, Micah, from Micah's sons, Shamir, Micah's brother, Ishiah, from Ishiah's sons, Zechariah, Merari's sons, Mali and Mushi, from their sons, Jahaziah, his son, Merari's sons by his son, Jahaziah, Shoham, Zakur, and Ibri, from Mali, Eleazar, who had no sons, from Kish, from Kish's sons, Jaharimiel, Mushi's sons, Mali, Ader, and Jeremoth. These were the descendants of the Levites according to their ancestral families. They also cast lots the same as the relatives, the descendants of Aaron, did in the presence of King David, Zadok, Ahimelech, and the heads of the families of the priests and Levites, their family heads and their younger brothers alike. And that is the reading of First Chronicles chapters 23 and 24. Again, we're focusing here on the Levites because they played a very important role in the religious life of Israel, especially coming back from captivity. They're wanting to get back going the way they need to go. And in order to do that, they need to have the proper people in place that were to be at the center of the religious practice within the family of Israel, within the nation of Israel. And of course, that focused around the priesthood. So we're kind of we're tracing the lineage of the priesthood and the Levites so that they can make sure that they're doing the right things now post exile. Once we get to verse 3, or here in chapter 23, we're talking about David being old and again making proper preparations for the worship that would take place within the temple that not he would build, but that his son would build. So we'll make sure everything's in place. He wants those who are 30 years older, or 30 years old and older, to be ready as soon as the temple is constructed to get to work, doing the things that they need to be doing. It talks about all these 24,000 are to be in charge of the work on Yahweh's temple. They're told the various things that they are to do. Again, the Levites are divided up based upon the sons of Levi: Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. Kohath is the one we want to pay special attention to because it is from Kohath's sons, specifically Amram, that the priestly line of Aaron is going to come from. That is why there is a focus in verse 13 and 14 on Aaron's sons, that his descendants were set apart forever to consecrate the most holy things, to burn incense in the presence of Yahweh, to minister to him, and to pronounce blessings on his name forever. So again, Aaron, very, very special. His lineage, extremely important in the religious life of Israel. Get down to verse number 20. Let's see here. Verse number 25. David speaks about Yahweh giving rest to his people on every side, and that at the time of peace, remember that's the reason David was not able to build the temple was because he was a man of war. He had shed much blood. But his son Solomon, his name sounding something like the Hebrew word for peace, shalom, Solomon, shalom, there's some overlap there. During his time of peace, the temple would be able to be constructed, and Yahweh would come to rest there in the city that bears his name. Remember, that was always something that Yahweh talked about leading up to the time of the kingdom in Israel, is looking for that place where his name would dwell. And it was not in the many places that the tabernacle had been previously. Because remember, the tabernacle was moved from place to place, and that was the responsibility of the Levites, was to make sure that it was picked up and moved from place to place. But now finally in Jerusalem, whenever the temple was built, there would be a permanent place for Yahweh's dwelling. And at that point, there's no longer the need for the Levites to carry the tabernacle or any of the equipment for its service. So those people would probably be given new assignments, things that they can do to continue to contribute to the religious life of Israel. We read about there being responsibility for the courts and the chambers, the purification of all the holy things, the work of the service of God's temple, the rows, the bread of the presence, the fine flour for the grain offering, the wafers of unleavened bread, the baking, the mixing, the measurements, the volume and length. All these things needed to be taken care of. So that's the Levites' responsibility to do so. And it's the Levites' responsibilities as well to make sure they stand every morning to give thanks and praise to Yahweh, and likewise to do the same in the evening, to offer the burnt offerings on to Yahweh on the Sabbaths, in the new moons, at the appointed festivals, to offer regularly in Yahweh's presence according to the number prescribed to them. The responsibilities for carrying out all the things in the tent of meeting, in the holy place. All these things were the responsibilities of the Levites. Remember, they're divided up into 24 different groups, and they each have their individual responsibilities. It's very important. Number one, they knew that they belong to these particular groups. And number two, know their responsibilities. And number three, make sure that these responsibilities are carried out. Again, you read the prophets, you recognize that not even the priests were doing as they should have. They fell, unfortunately, into the pattern of Nadab and Abihu, which verse 24 tells us, which focuses in on the priesthood. Again, Aaron's descendants specifically, that they died. And we know the story back in Leviticus 10, why they died. They did not respect holy space. They did not respect the commands of Yahweh. And for that, they were burned to death. So unfortunately, the priests later on are going to make not the exact same mistakes, but the same mistakes in essence, in the fact they did not respect Yahweh's authority. They did not honor his sacred space, and they dishonored it by the way that they carried themselves and behaved. for here we have these, again, this lineage of the priesthood. Again, the priesthood matters. They needed to make sure that those who were leading them in worship were the proper people. So they're going all the way back to the time of David and then Solomon, and tracing this to know, these are the families of the priest, and they need to be the ones responsible for these particular duties. Especially once we get to verses 17 through 18, we see all the 24 of these groups. So I misspoke earlier. It wasn't 24 groups for, well, I guess it was in some ways. There were 24,000 who were in charge of the work of Yahweh's temple from the Levites. That's why I got mixed up with. There are 24,000 there. Here, there are 24 different groups of the priesthood, or the priests that were just the various families of that. What's interesting is verse number 10, we read about Abijah, and that lineage of the priest is actually mentioned all the way in Jesus's day in Luke chapter 1 and verse number 5. So we see, again, they would not have known this unless, the chronicler and others previously. And it does seem, we've noted that the chronicler had access to historical records and such. Knowing this, they were able to trace and know legitimately that they belong to these various families of the priesthood, so that they can carry out their various duties. And that's really the main point, again, of these chapters, is to show those who are post-exile, this is who you belong to, and this is your responsibility as someone who belongs to this priestly family, and that you have to do your part to honor God by stepping up and performing your role, whatever that role might be. So that's what we have here in chapters 23 and 24. Chapters 25 and 26 are going to tell us some more duties that the various Levites had, specifically in music and then in gatekeeping. So we'll note that in our reading tomorrow in chapters 25 and 26. If you have any questions about these texts here, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me on this Friday. I do hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and I hope you'll join in again tomorrow as we read together on Saturday, October 21st, 1 Chronicles chapters 25 and 26. Take care and God bless.